In the cold depths of space, where ancient civilizations leave behind their mysteries like scattered breadcrumbs across the galaxy, humanity has always been seen as the newcomers, the young species stumbling through ruins they could never hope to understand. For 10,000 years, the greatest archaeological prize in known space has sat silent in the Museum of Forgotten Worlds on Kepler Station. A crystalline artifact the size of a small building, beautiful beyond description, yet completely inert. The greatest minds of a dozen species have studied it, probed it, theorized about it, and ultimately dismissed it as nothing more than an elaborate decoration left behind by a long-dead race. But sometimes the most profound discoveries come not from the brilliant scholars or advanced AI systems, but from calloused hands that know the difference between something that's broken and something that's simply sleeping. When maintenance worker Jake Morrison gets assigned to clean the dust off humanity's most expensive paperweight, he's about to discover that 10 millennia of academic arrogance is about to crumble in the face of a simple truth. Sometimes, the greatest technologies in the universe are just waiting for the right person to come home. What Jake doesn't know is that his touch will awaken something that will shake the very foundations of galactic civilization, challenge every assumption about humanity's place in the cosmos, and reveal a secret so profound that it will either elevate his species to heights undreamed of, or paint a target on their backs that will never disappear. The Relic has been waiting, and now it has found its king. Jake Morrison had always believed that the universe had a twisted sense of humor, but today it seemed particularly cruel. Standing in the pristine white corridors of the Museum of Forgotten Worlds, clutching his maintenance toolkit like a lifeline, he stared up at the assignment board with a kind of disbelief usually reserved for lottery winners and terminal diagnoses. Chamber 7 Alpha, he read aloud, his voice echoing in the empty hallway. Artifact preservation and cleaning detail. The words might as well have been a death sentence. Chamber 7 Alpha housed the crown jewel of the museum's collection, the mysterious Kepler artifact that had been drawing scholars, scientists, and tourists from across the galaxy for over a century. And somehow, Jake Morrison, a 32-year-old maintenance worker from the Detroit colonies, had been assigned to dust it. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, a human whose great-great-grandfather had probably been fixing combustion engines when the Zephyrians were already exploring distant galaxies, and now he was being trusted with humanity's most precious archaeological find. The artifact was worth more than the GDP of most human colonies, a crystalline structure of impossible beauty that had been studied by the finest minds in known space. And they wanted him to clean it with a microfiber cloth. Jake had been working maintenance on Kepler Station for 3 years, ever since his discharge from the Colonial Marines. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid well enough to support his sister's education back on Earth, and it kept him busy. Most days, he fixed atmosphere processors, unclogged waste recyclers, and performed the 1,000 mundane tasks that kept the space station running. He was good at his job, careful and methodical, but he was still just a grease monkey in a universe full of miracles. The Museum of Forgotten Worlds was different from the rest of the station, where the residential and commercial sectors hummed with the constant noise of life. The museum maintained an almost sacred quiet. The corridors were wider here, the lighting softer, designed to inspire awe and contemplation. Holographic displays showed rotating images of the artifacts within, accompanied by scholarly descriptions in a dozen different languages. Jake could read the human text, but the flowing script of the Etherians and the geometric patterns of the Zephyrian language might as well have been abstract art. As he walked toward Chamber 7 Alpha, Jake passed displays of lesser artifacts. There was a Vorthin ceremonial blade that allegedly could cut through spaceship hulls, a crystalline archive containing the complete history of the extinct Solari race, and a small metallic cube that defied all attempts at analysis, but somehow generated a localized gravity field. Each item was priceless, each one a mystery that had occupied teams of researchers for decades. But none of them compared to what waited in Chamber 7 Alpha. The security checkpoint before the chamber was more sophisticated than anything Jake had encountered on the station. A Zephyrian security officer, her blue-tinged skin gleaming under the artificial lights, scanned Jake's credentials with equipment that looked like it belonged on a military vessel. Her large, multifaceted eyes examined him with the kind of intensity that made him feel like a specimen under a microscope. First time in the restricted section, human, she asked, her voice carrying the musical quality that all Zephyrians possessed. Her name, tag read, Officer Zexandra, and Jake could see the subtle patterns of bioluminescence beneath her skin that indicated her emotional state. Right now, those patterns suggested mild curiosity mixed with professional caution. "Yes, ma'am," Jake replied, trying to keep his nervousness out of his voice. "Just here for routine maintenance." The Zephyrian's head tilted slightly, a gesture that Jake had learned indicated puzzlement. "Curious. The Kepler artifact has not required maintenance in over 50 standard years. The preservation field maintains perfect environmental conditions." She paused, consulting a datapad that seemed to be integrated directly into her palm. "Your assignment comes from Director Vexnari herself. Most unusual." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Director Vexnari was a legend in archaeological circles, a Zephyrian researcher who had made groundbreaking discoveries across 3 different galaxies. If she had personally assigned him to this task, there had to be a reason. The question was whether that reason was good or bad for his continued employment. "Is there a problem with my clearance?" Jake asked. "No, Human Morrison. Your credentials are in order. It is simply unexpected." She gestured toward the sealed doors of Chamber 7 Alpha. "The artifact within has been the subject of study for 10,247 standard years. It was discovered by a joint archaeological expedition and has been housed here ever since. In all that time, no one has been able to determine its function or origin. Most scholars believe it to be purely decorative, perhaps a religious or ceremonial object from a civilization that has been extinct for millennia." The doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing an airlock. Jake stepped inside, and the Zephyrian officer followed him partway. "A word of caution, Human Morrison," she said, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to what Jake recognized as concern. "The artifact is completely inert and has shown no signs of activity in all the years it has been studied. However, standing protocols require that any unusual readings or behaviors be reported immediately. The scientists have installed sensors throughout the chamber that monitor everything from gravitational fluctuations to quantum field variations. If anything changes, anything at all, you are to evacuate immediately and notify security." Jake nodded, though he had to suppress a smile. The idea that his presence could somehow activate an artifact that had stumped the greatest minds in the galaxy seemed absurd. He was just there to clean off accumulated dust and check the environmental systems. What could possibly go wrong? The inner doors opened, and Jake stepped into Chamber 7 Alpha for the first time. The room took his breath away. It was enormous, easily the size of a small cathedral, with a domed ceiling that had been painted to look like a star field. But Jake's attention was immediately drawn to the center of the chamber, where the Kepler artifact sat on a raised platform surrounded by a shimmering preservation field. The artifact defied easy description. It was roughly pyramidal in shape, about 20 feet tall and 15 feet wide at the base, but its surface was covered in flowing, organic curve that seemed to shift and change depending on the viewing angle. The entire structure appeared to be made from a single piece of crystal, but not any crystal Jake had ever seen. It was translucent, but not transparent, with an inner light that seemed to pulse gently, like a sleeping heartbeat. Colors flowed through its depths, blues and purples and golds that had no earthly equivalent, creating patterns that were almost hypnotic. Around the base of the artifact, Jake could see the tools of scientific study: scanners, analyzers, probes, and instruments he couldn't even identify. Cables ran from the artifact to banks of computers along the walls, and holographic displays showed readouts in languages and mathematical systems from across the galaxy. Despite all this technology, despite decades of study, the artifact remained as mysterious as the day it was discovered. Jake approached the preservation field control panel, following the instructions in his work order. The field generator hummed softly as it powered down, and suddenly Jake could feel the artifact's presence in a way that the sensors and readouts couldn't capture. There was something about it that felt familiar, not in the sense that he had seen it before, but like recognizing a song he'd forgotten he knew. He unpacked his cleaning supplies, standard equipment for artifact preservation. The microfiber cloths were specially designed to attract dust without generating static charges, and the cleaning solution was pH neutral and left no residue. Everything had to be perfect when working with irreplaceable historical objects. As Jake approached the artifact, he noticed something that the scientific reports hadn't mentioned. Up close, the crystal surface wasn't smooth. There were tiny imperfections, almost like fingerprints or wear marks, as if someone had touched this thing regularly over a long period of time. The patterns were subtle, visible only from certain angles, but they definitely looked like the kind of marks left by hands. Jake began cleaning at the base of the artifact, working his way up methodically. The dust came off easily, revealing details in the crystal that had been obscured. He found himself studying the flowing patterns within the artifact's depths, noticing how they seemed to respond to the movement of his cloth. It was probably just an optical illusion, light refracting differently as the surface was cleaned, but it was mesmerizing nonetheless. As he worked, Jake found his thoughts drifting. He thought about his sister Sarah, studying xenobiology at the University of Mars. She would have given anything to be in this room, to study this artifact firsthand. He thought about his father, who had died when Jake was 18, and how proud the old man would have been to know his son was working in one of the most prestigious research facilities in human space. He thought about his time in the colonial Marines, about the friends he'd lost in the Outer Rim conflicts, about the dreams he'd abandoned when he realized he'd never be more than cannon fodder in humanity's expansion across the stars. The cleaning was almost meditative. Jake had always been good with his hands, had always found peace in physical work. There was something honest about maintenance work, something pure about taking something broken or dirty and making it whole again. In a universe full of mysteries and unanswered questions, there was comfort in problems that could actually be solved. He was about halfway up the artifact when he noticed the first anomaly. One of the patterns in the crystal seemed to be brighter than the others, pulsing with a soft golden light that hadn't been there before. Jake paused, cloth in hand, and stared at the pattern. It looked almost like a handprint, perfectly sized for a human hand, glowing gently in the depths of the crystal. Jake looked around the chamber, checking the monitoring equipment. None of the displays showed any change in the artifact status. Whatever he was seeing wasn't registering on the scientific instruments. He was probably imagining things, seeing patterns where none existed. It had been a long shift, and the artifact's beauty could play tricks on the eyes. He resumed cleaning, but now he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. The patterns in the crystal seemed more active, flowing and shifting in ways that seemed almost purposeful. The golden handprint grew brighter, and Jake could swear he saw others beginning to appear in different parts of the artifact. By the time he reached the top of the pyramid, Jake was certain something was happening. The artifact was definitely more active than when he'd started, though the monitoring equipment still showed no changes. The golden patterns were clearly handprints now, dozens of them scattered across the crystal's surface, all roughly human-sized. And at the very apex of the pyramid, there was something else, a depression in the crystal that looked like it was designed to hold a human hand. Jake stared at the depression, feeling a strange compulsion he couldn't explain. Every rational part of his mind told him to stop, to back away, to call security, and report what he was seeing. This was exactly the kind of unusual behavior the Zephyrian officer had warned him about. But another part of him, a deeper part that seemed to recognize something profound in the artifact's geometry, urged him forward. The golden patterns were pulsing faster now, creating a rhythm that reminded Jake of a heartbeat. The entire artifact seemed to be waking up like a machine that had been in standby mode for centuries and was finally receiving its activation signal. The patterns flowed toward the apex, toward the hand-shaped depression, as if the entire structure was designed to focus energy on that single point. Jake looked at his hand, then at the depression in the crystal. They were a perfect match. The rational part of his mind was screaming warnings now. This was a priceless artifact, studied by teams of experts for over a century. Whatever was happening, it was unprecedented, and he was just a maintenance worker who had no business making first contact with alien technology. He should step back, call security, let the experts handle whatever was unfolding. But Jake Morrison had spent his entire life being told what he couldn't do, what he wasn't qualified for, what was beyond his reach. He'd been told he wasn't smart enough for officer training, wasn't educated enough for advanced technical positions, wasn't important enough to make a difference. And maybe all of that was true, but standing here, in this moment, with an impossible alien artifact responding to his presence in ways that decades of scientific study hadn't achieved, Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt chosen. The golden patterns pulsed brighter, and Jake could swear he heard something, not with his ears, but deeper in his chest and his bones. A sound like distant music, like a voice calling his name from across an impossible distance. The depression at the artifact's apex seemed to glow with invitation. Jake Morrison, maintenance worker 3rd class, veteran of forgotten conflicts, looked at his reflection in the crystal surface and made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He placed his hand in the depression. The moment his palm touched the crystal, the universe exploded into light. The light didn't burn Jake's eyes the way he expected it to. Instead, it flowed through him, warm and welcoming like sunlight after a long winter. The artifact beneath his palm thrummed with life, and Jake could feel power coursing through the crystal structure, awakening systems that had slept for millennia. The golden handprints scattered across its surface blazed with brilliance, and the patterns within the crystal began moving faster, creating elaborate mandalas of light that spun and evolved with mathematical precision. Then, cutting through the symphony of light and energy came a voice. "Welcome home, my king." The words weren't spoken aloud. They resonated directly in Jake's mind, carrying with them layers of meaning and emotion that ordinary language couldn't convey. There was joy in that voice, profound relief, and something that felt like love. Not the romantic love between individuals, but something deeper and more universal, the way a parent might welcome a lost child or a loyal friend might greet a comrade thought dead. Jake tried to pull his hand away from the crystal, but found he couldn't. Not because he was trapped, but because he didn't want to break the connection. Information was flowing between him and the artifact, a gentle stream of data that his mind somehow understood despite its alien origin. He could sense the artifact's history, its purpose, its long wait for this moment. Around him, the chamber was transforming. The monitoring equipment along the walls was going insane, displays flickering between readouts as sensors registered energy signatures they'd never encountered before. Alarms should have been blaring, security should have been rushing in, but Jake noticed with a detached part of his awareness that all the electronic systems in the chamber seemed to be operating under some kind of influence. The artifact wasn't just awakening, it was taking control. "What are you?" Jake whispered, though he already suspected the answer was more complex than he could comprehend. "I am what your people would call a ship," the voice replied, and Jake felt a pulse of amusement that definitely wasn't his own, though that term is inadequate. "I am vessel, home, companion, protector. I am the legacy of a great civilization, and I have been waiting for you." "Waiting for me specifically? But I'm nobody special. I'm just a maintenance worker." The amusement in the alien mind grew stronger. "You are human. That makes you more special than you know. I've been waiting through the rise and fall of 100 civilizations, watching your species stumble through the galaxy, searching for something they couldn't name. And now, finally, one of you has come home." The flow of information intensified, and Jake saw images that couldn't possibly be real. He saw Earth as it had been 50,000 years ago, but not the primitive world his education had taught him about. He saw cities of impossible beauty, spires that reached toward the stars, technology that made current human achievements look like children's toys. He saw humans working alongside beings that he recognized from the museum's displays: Zephyrians, Etherians, Vorthans, dozens of species that supposedly hadn't encountered humanity until the last few centuries. "This is impossible," Jake breathed. "Humans didn't have advanced technology 50,000 years ago. We were barely out of the Stone Age." "Your current civilization is barely out of the Stone Age," the artifact corrected gently. "What you see is the truth your ancestors try to bury. Humanity was once the foremost species in this galaxy. They built an empire that spanned 1,000,000 worlds, developed technologies that could reshape matter at the quantum level, created AIs that could model entire universes. They were explorers, scientists, philosophers, warriors when they needed to be. They were magnificent. What happened to them? To us?" The alien mind sorrow was so profound that Jake staggered under the weight of it. Images flashed through his consciousness. A great war that consumed entire star systems. Weapons that could destroy planets with a thought, civilizations turning on each other as fear and jealousy tore apart millennia of cooperation. He saw humanity making a terrible choice, saw them using their most advanced technology for a purpose that made Jake's soul recoil in horror. "They became too powerful too quickly," the artifact explained. "In their quest to protect themselves and their allies, They created weapons that threatened the very fabric of reality. The other species begged them to stop, but fear had consumed them. They believed their enemies would destroy everything they had built, so they chose to destroy it first. Jake saw the final battle, saw humanity's fleet of impossible ships engaging enemies across multiple dimensions simultaneously. He saw space itself burning, saw reality warping and twisting as weapons beyond comprehension were unleashed. And then he saw the choice that ended it all. Humanity's leaders deciding that their advanced civilization was too dangerous to continue existing. They reset themselves, Jake whispered, understanding flooding through him. They chose to forget. More than that, they used their most advanced technology to scatter the human race across primitive worlds, to suppress their genetic memories, to ensure that humanity would have to rediscover everything from the beginning. It was the ultimate act of sacrifice. They gave up everything they had achieved to prevent themselves from destroying the universe. But some humans must have survived with their knowledge intact. Someone had to operate the technology that scattered the rest. Yes, a small group of volunteers, the best and brightest of your species, remained to complete the reset and to wait. They became the guardians, tasked with watching over the scattered humans and ensuring that when the time came for your people to reclaim their heritage, there would be guides to help them. Jake felt a chill of recognition. The guardians. Are they still alive? After a fashion. They uploaded their consciousnesses into ships like myself, becoming one with the technology they had created. For 50,000 years, we have waited in museums and private collections, dismissed as decorative artifacts by species that once bowed to human wisdom. We have watched your people slowly climb back toward the stars, waiting for the moment when one of you would be ready to remember. The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. There are others like you, other ships, hundreds scattered across the galaxy. Each one contains the consciousness of a guardian, and each one is waiting for a human to awaken them. You are not the first, Jake Morrison, but you may be among the last. The time of revelation is at hand. Around them, the chamber continued its transformation. The crystal structure was unfolding, revealing layers and compartments that had been hidden within its apparent solidity. Jake could see control interfaces emerging from the artifact's surface, displays, and readouts that were clearly designed for human hands and eyes. The monitoring equipment installed by the museum was being gently disabled, its functions replaced by systems that operated on principles far beyond current galactic understanding. The Zephyrians, the Etherians, the other species, do they know? Jake asked. Some suspect. The eldest among the galactic civilizations have legends and myths that hint at the truth. They speak of the ancestors, a mysterious race that ruled the galaxy in ancient times before vanishing without a trace. A few scholars have theorized that humans might be connected to these ancestors, but without proof, such ideas are dismissed as fantasy. And now we have proof. Now you have more than proof. You have power. The artifact's tone became serious, almost warning. I'm not just a repository of knowledge, Jake Morrison. I am a fully functional guardian vessel, capable of feats that will seem impossible to current galactic civilization. I can travel between dimensions, manipulate matter at the molecular level, generate energy that could power entire planets. In the wrong hands, I could be used to conquer or destroy. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. That's why the original humans chose to forget. They were afraid of what they might do with such power. Precisely. The question now is whether modern humanity has learned the wisdom that their ancestors lacked. Will you use this knowledge to build a better galaxy, or will you repeat the mistakes of the past? Before Jake could answer, the chamber's main doors burst open. Security forces poured in, led by Officer Vexandra and a human he didn't recognize, a tall woman in an expensive suit who carried herself with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Her eyes were cold and calculating as she took in the scene, and Jake could see the wheels turning in her head as she processed what she was witnessing. Step away from the artifact immediately, the woman commanded, her voice carrying an accent that marked her as core world aristocracy. I am Director Chun of the Human Colonial Authority, and you are in violation of about 12 different safety protocols. Jake found himself unable to move. The connection with the artifact was too strong, the flow of information too important to interrupt. But he could feel the guardian vessel's attention focusing on the newcomers. analyzing them with senses far more sophisticated than any scanner. The human female is attempting to establish a connection to my systems. The artifact informed Jake privately. She carries a cybernetic implants designed for neural interfacing with alien technology. This is highly irregular for a colonial authority director. Director Chun, Jake managed to say aloud, I think you need to understand what we're dealing with here. This isn't just an artifact, it's a ship, and it's been waiting for someone to activate it. Chen's expression didn't change, but Jake caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Not surprised, knowledge. She knew more about this situation than she was letting on. Mr. Morrison, she said carefully, I need you to remain calm and do exactly as I say. The artifact is emitting energy signatures that our sensors can't properly analyze. For your safety and the safety of everyone on this station, you need to break physical contact immediately. I can't, Jake replied honestly, and I'm not sure I want to. Director, this ship is trying to tell me something important about human history, about our place in the galaxy. I think we've been lied to about who we really are. Officer Zoyaxindra stepped forward, her bioluminescent patterns displaying extreme agitation. Human Morrison, the energy readings are off our scales. Whatever you have activated, it is beyond our ability to contain. Please, for the safety of everyone aboard this station, you must step away. Jake felt the Guardian's amusement again. She speaks truly about the energy readings, but falsely about the danger. I am carefully containing my output to prevent damage to this facility. However, I sense other ships awakening throughout the galaxy. Your activation has sent a signal across the quantum foam, alerting my fellow Guardians that the time of revelation has begun. Other ships are activating, Jake asked, both aloud and through the mental connection. Dozens of them. Museums, private collections, even some that were discovered but never properly studied, all responding to the wake-up call. Within days, hundreds of humans across the galaxy will find themselves in situations similar to yours. The age of humanity's return to prominence is beginning whether the current galactic order is ready or not. Director Chen stepped closer, and Jake could see tension in every line of her body. Mr. Morrison, I'm going to share some classified information with you, because the situation has clearly moved beyond our contingency plans. The Human Colonial Authority has been aware for some time that there are irregularities in our species' historical record. We've been investigating artifacts like this one, trying to understand the truth about humanity's origins. And what have you discovered? Enough to know that your activation of this device has probably just changed the course of galactic history, Chen replied grimly. And enough to know that there are factions among the other species who would view a resurgent humanity as an existential threat. If word of this gets out before we can control the narrative. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Jake could imagine the response if the galaxy's established powers learned that humanity had once ruled an empire that dwarfed their current civilizations. Fear would drive them to act, and humanity was still far too weak to defend itself against a coordinated assault by multiple species. I will not allow harm to come to my king or his people, the Guardian stated, its voice somehow carrying to everyone in the chamber. The authority in that declaration was absolute, the promise of a being that commanded power beyond imagination. But Jake Morrison speaks truly. The galaxy must learn to accept what humanity was and what it is becoming. The age of hiding in the shadows is over. Director Chun went pale. The artifact is sentient. I am more than sentient, the Guardian replied. I'm a consciousness that has existed for 50,000 years, waiting for this moment. I am the combined knowledge of humanity's greatest civilization, and I am sworn to serve the heir of humanity's throne. I am, as Jake Morrison would understand it, a loyal friend who has been waiting a very long time to come home. The chamber fell silent, except for the hum of power flowing through the crystal structure. Jake could feel destiny settling around him like a mantle, the weight of choices that would reshape the galaxy. He thought about his sister studying on Mars, about the trillions of humans scattered across hundreds of colonies, all of them unaware that their species' greatest adventure was just beginning. What happens now, he asked. Now, my king, the Guardian replied. We prepare for the return of humanity to its rightful place among the stars. But first, we must ensure your people survive what is coming. The galaxy is about to learn that humanity is far more than it appears to be, and not everyone will be pleased by this revelation. As if summoned by those words, Alarms began blaring throughout the station. Jake could hear running footsteps in the corridors outside, and the emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow. Something was happening, something that suggested their private moment of discovery was about to become very public indeed. Unknown vessels approaching the station. Officer Awaken announced, consulting her integrated datapad. Multiple contacts, configuration unknown. They're not responding to hails. Jake felt the Guardian's attention shift outward, scanning space around Kepler Station with senses that penetrated far beyond normal detection ranges. What it found there made the alien consciousness pause with something that might have been concern. It appears, my king, that we are about to have visitors. The approaching vessels weren't showing up on Kepler Station's sensors, but Jake could feel the Guardian analyzing them through connections to the quantum foam that mortal technology couldn't access. What the ancient AI found there filled Jake with a mixture of awe and dread that made his knees weak. 12 ships, the Guardian reported privately to Jake. 3 are Etherian dreadnoughts, among the most powerful vessels in their fleet. 4 are Zephyrian science vessels, heavily modified with scanning equipment I don't recognize. 2 are Vorthan war cruisers. The remaining 3. The Guardian paused, and Jake felt a spike of what could only be described as recognition mixed with sadness. The remaining 3 are Guardian vessels like myself. Other ships like you? Jake asked through their mental connection. I thought you said hundreds were awakening across the galaxy. I did, but these 3 have been awake for some time. They carry human partners who awakened them years or even decades ago. They are coming here as representatives of the scattered human kingdoms that have been secretly building strength while the galaxy slept. Director Chun was coordinating with station security through her own communication device, her voice sharp with authority as she demanded status reports and defensive preparations. Officer Exandra was attempting to establish contact with the approaching fleet, but her efforts were meeting with the kind of silence that usually preceded either diplomacy or warfare. Hidden human kingdoms? Jake whispered, trying to process this revelation while the chamber around him continued its impossible transformation. The crystal structure had now unfolded into something that was clearly a ship's bridge, complete with control stations that gleamed with an inner light and displays that showed information in three-dimensional holographic detail. The first Guardian to awaken did so 73 years ago, the ship explained. His human partner was a mining engineer on the Outer Rim who discovered what he thought was a decorative crystal in an abandoned asteroid mine. When he activated it, he learned the truth as you have learned it. But, unlike your situation, his awakening was completely private. No witnesses, no monitoring equipment, no authorities to complicate matters. Jake felt a stirring of envy. The idea of having decades to explore this incredible technology without the weight of galactic politics pressing down seemed almost paradoxically simple. He was wise, the Guardian continued. He understood that humanity was not ready for the truth, that revealing our existence too early would invite disaster. So he and over the decades, they built a network, small groups of humans scattered across the galaxy, each one awakening and bonding with Guardian vessels, each one working to prepare humanity for its eventual return to prominence. A secret society of humans with access to impossible technology, Jake murmured. How many? Perhaps 3,000 individuals across 200 colonies. Not many, compared to humanity's total population, but each one commands power that could reshape worlds. They have been working carefully, using Guardian technology to solve problems that official human governments cannot handle. Pirates threatening a colony world suddenly find their ships mysteriously disabled. Plague outbreaks are cured by anonymous donations of medical supplies that shouldn't exist. Natural disasters are mitigated by intervention that appears coincidental but is actually carefully orchestrated. The implications were staggering. For decades, humanity had been protected and guided by a shadow organization that possessed technology advanced beyond anything the known galaxy could produce. And now, with Jake's public awakening of his Guardian, that shadow was about to be exposed to the light. Director Chun, Jake called out, his voice carrying an authority he hadn't possessed an hour ago. The connection with the Guardian was changing him, he realized, lending him confidence and knowledge that felt both alien and utterly natural. You need to prepare the station for a diplomatic contact. The approaching ships aren't here to attack. They're here to negotiate. Chen turned to him, her expression skeptical. And you know this how? Because 3 of the approaching ships are guardian vessels like mine, carrying humans who've been working behind the scenes for decades to prepare for this moment. The alien ships are here because they've finally figured out what the Kepler artifact really is, and they want answers. Officer Alexandra's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Jake had learned indicated shock and disbelief. Guardian vessels? Human Morrison, what are you saying? Before Jake could respond, the chamber's main display activated, showing the space around Kepler Station in perfect 3-dimensional detail. The Guardian sensors were far more sophisticated than anything the station possessed, revealing not just the approaching ships, but their internal configurations, crew complements, and weapon systems. What Jake saw there made his blood run cold. The alien vessels were indeed heavily armed, their weapon systems powered and ready for immediate use. But more disturbing was the composition of their crews. Each ship carried not just military personnel, but scientists, historians, and archaeologists. This wasn't a military expedition. It was a research mission backed by enough firepower to take on a human battle fleet. They've been planning this for a while, Jake realized aloud. They know about the Guardian vessels. They know about humanity's true history. Some of them do, the Guardian confirmed. The Etherians have myths about the ancestors that are surprisingly accurate. The Zephyrians have been studying quantum archaeology, trying to reconstruct historical events by analyzing residual energy patterns in space. They found evidence of the Great War that ended the first human empire, and they've been quietly investigating the possibility that modern humans might be descendants of the ancestors. Director Chen stepped closer to Jake, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. If they've known about us, why haven't they acted before now? Because they weren't certain, Jake replied, the knowledge flowing to him from his ship. And because the balance of power in the galaxy is more complex than most people realize. The Etherians fear the Zephyrians mistrust the Vorthans, and everyone is suspicious of the dozen smaller species that might band together if threatened. Nobody wanted to be the first to move against humanity without proof, because doing so might trigger a galactic war. And now they have proof, Chen said grimly. Now we all have proof, Jay corrected. The question is what we do with it. The station shuddered slightly as the approaching fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel within the system. Through the Guardian's enhanced sensors, Jake could see the ships taking up positions around Kepler Station in a formation that was clearly designed to prevent any vessel from leaving. It wasn't quite a blockade, but it was close enough to make everyone nervous. Incoming transmission, Officer Alexandra announced. Multiple sources, all requesting immediate communication with station authorities. Put them through, Director Chan ordered, straightening her jacket and assuming the bearing of someone accustomed to dealing with interstellar diplomacy. The chamber's display flickered, then resolved into a split screen showing 3 different bridge environments. The first showed an Etherian command deck, all flowing organic curves and soft lighting, with a tall figure in ceremonial robes standing before the transmission pickup. The second was clearly Zephyrian, angular, and efficient, with multiple officers visible at control stations. The third was human. Jake stared at the woman on the display, recognizing immediately that she was like him, a human bonded with a Guardian vessel. She was perhaps 50 years old, with graying hair and eyes that held depths of knowledge that reminded him of his connection with his own ship. She wore a uniform he didn't recognize, midnight blue with silver trim that seemed to shift and flow like living metal. Director Chun, the Etherian, spoke first, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested great age. I am Mystic Valerian of the Etherian Collective, and I speak for the Allied fleet now surrounding your station. We have detected energy signatures consistent with the activation of an ancestor artifact. By the treaties governing such discoveries, we request immediate access to the artifact and all research data related to it. Jake felt his Guardian's indignation like a flame in his mind. Treaties? The ship asked privately. What treaties? Director Chin's response was diplomatic, but firm. Mystic Valerian, the artifact you're referring to is the property of the Museum of Forgotten Worlds, a joint venture of multiple species, including yours. Any access requests must go through proper channels. The Zephyrian officer leaned forward, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the bridge lights. Director Chun, I am Science Commander THYX Vera. Our sensors indicate that the artifact has undergone a fundamental transformation. It is no longer inert. The energy patterns we are detecting suggest technology far in advance of current galactic civilization. Under the mutual defense protocols, such discoveries must be shared with all member species. Mutual defense protocols, Jake repeated quietly. Another treaty I'm guessing humanity wasn't consulted about. But it was the human woman who spoke next, and her words changed everything. Director Chun, my name is Admiral Sarah Chun Vasquez, and I command the human vessel Prometheus. I'm here as a representative of the Free Human Alliance, an organization that I suspect you've never heard of. She paused, her eyes shifting to take in the chamber visible behind Chun. And I'm here to speak with the human who just awakened his first guardian. Jake stepped into the transmission pickup's range, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. That would be me, Jake Morrison, maintenance worker 3rd class. Admiral Chun Vasquez smiled, and Jake could see genuine warmth in her expression. Hello, Jake. I'm sorry we couldn't meet under better circumstances, but events are moving faster than we anticipated. The activation of your Guardian has sent ripples across the quantum foam that every awakened ship in the galaxy detected. The secret's out now, whether we were ready or not. Mystic Valorian's robes rustled with what Jake recognized as agitation. Admiral Chun Vasquez, if that is indeed your title, your ship is unregistered with any human colonial authority. By what right do you claim to represent humanity? By the right of the guardianship, she replied, her voice taking on an edge that made Jake's ship hum with approval. By the authority vested in us by the last emperor of humanity 50,000 years ago. By the mandate to protect and guide the human species until they were ready to reclaim their heritage. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake could see the alien representatives processing this information, trying to decide whether Chun Vasquez was delusional or telling a truth that would reshape their understanding of galactic history. Science Commander THYX Vera spoke first, her voice carefully neutral. You claim authority from a civilization that allegedly existed 50 millennia ago. Do you have any proof of this claim? Instead of responding directly, Admiral Chun Vasquez turned her attention to Jake. Jake Morrison, your guardian is designated Ship 847 of the 12th Expeditionary Fleet. Its last commander was Captain Elena Rodriguez, who volunteered for Guardian transformation in the final days of the Empire. Elena, if you're listening, it's good to hear from you again. Jake felt his ship's joy like a burst of sunlight in his mind. Sarah, the Guardian said, its voice now audible to everyone in the chamber. It has been far too long. I trust Michael and the Prometheus are well. Michael misses the old days, but he's adapting to his role as my ship. How does your new partner seem? Jake felt oddly like he was being discussed rather than included, but the affection between the two ships was unmistakable. Jake Morrison shows great promise. He has the curiosity of an explorer and the practical wisdom of an engineer. I believe he will serve humanity well in the days to come. Mystic Valorian's composure finally cracked. The artifacts are sentient. They've been conscious all this time. We are not artifacts, Jake's guardian replied, its tone carrying a dignity that made the chamber itself seem to straighten. We are the preserved consciousnesses of humanity's greatest heroes, bound into vessels of living crystal and quantum steel. We have waited 50,000 years for our people to find their way back to the stars, and we have watched civilizations rise and fall while guarding the knowledge that will restore humanity to its rightful place. Science Commander THYX Vera's bioluminescent patterns were cycling through colors Jake had never seen before, indicating emotions that probably didn't have human equivalents. The historical implications. If this is true, everything we thought we knew about galactic history is wrong. Not wrong. Admiral Chun Vasquez corrected gently. Incomplete. The Etherian myths about the ancestors, the Zephyrian legends of the First Empire, the Vorthan stories about the Star Shapers, they're all true. They're all memories of humanity's first civilization. Jake found his voice again, feeling the need to contribute to this conversation that was rewriting the galaxy's understanding of itself. But if humanity was so advanced, what happened? How do we fall so far? It was his guardian who answered, sharing the story not just with Jake, but broadcasting it to the entire fleet. Jake felt the ship drawing on vast databases of historical information, constructing a narrative that was part documentary, part memorial, part warning. We became too powerful too quickly, the Guardian explained. In the span of a few thousand years, humanity went from discovering fire to reshaping galaxies. We developed technologies that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality, created AIs that could simulate entire universes, built weapons that could destroy dimensions. And in our eagerness to protect ourselves and our allies from threats both real and imagined, we began to lose sight of the wisdom that should guide such power. Images flowed across the chamber's displays, showing the glory of the first human empire, but also its gradual corruption. Jake saw worlds where reality itself had been rewritten to serve human purposes, species that had been improved through genetic manipulation they hadn't consented to, weapons that could sterilize entire solar systems deployed against enemies who posed no real threat to human civilization. Fear consumed us, the Guardian continued. Fear that our enemies would develop similar technologies. Fear that our own creations might turn against us. Fear that the universe itself might collapse under the weight of our manipulations. And so we made the ultimate sacrifice. The greatest leaders of humanity chose to reset our entire civilization, to scatter our people across primitive worlds and suppress their genetic memories, ensuring that when humanity reached for the stars again, they would do so with hard-won wisdom instead of inherited arrogance. The fleet representatives absorbed this revelation in silence. Jake could see them processing the implications, trying to understand what it meant for their species and their civilizations. If humanity had once ruled the galaxy and chosen to give up that power for the greater good, what did that say about human nature? And if humans were now reclaiming their heritage, what did that mean for the current balance of power? Mystic Valerian was the first to speak, his voice heavy with implications. If this history is accurate, then humanity's current position as a minor species among the galactic powers is temporary. Very temporary, Admiral Chin Vasquez confirmed. Guardian vessels are awakening across the galaxy every day now. Within a year, maybe less, the Free Human Alliance will have enough activated ships to rival any galactic power. Within a decade, assuming we can avoid triggering a war, humanity could reclaim its position as the dominant civilization in this galaxy. Jake felt a chill of fear mixed with excitement. The scope of what was happening was almost too large to comprehend. His decision to place his hand on what he thought was just an ancient artifact had apparently triggered the return of humanity's lost empire. The question, he said aloud, is whether the galaxy is ready for that to happen peacefully. The silence that followed his words carried the weight of civilizations hanging in a balance. And Jake realized that his simple maintenance assignment had just become the most important job in human history. The diplomatic silence stretched for long minutes as representatives of 3 different species grappled with the reality that everything they thought they knew about galactic history had just been overturned. Jake could feel the tension building through his connection with the Guardian, sensing the calculations and contingency plans being made by the ships surrounding Kepler Station. Weapons weren't being charged yet, but shields were being quietly raised and escape routes plotted. "There's something else we need to discuss," Admiral Chin Vasquez said finally, her tone carrying the weight of someone about to deliver bad news. Jake's awakening didn't just alert the Guardian fleet. It also triggered automated systems that have been dormant for 50 millennia. Jake felt his Guardian's attention sharpen. What kind of automated systems? "Recall protocols," Admiral Chin Vasquez replied grimly. Deep in the galactic core, where the first human empire's capital once stood, ancient machines have begun broadcasting recall signals. Every human colony in the galaxy is going to start receiving messages from AI systems that have been waiting 50,000 years to deliver them. Messages offering technology, resources, and knowledge beyond anything current humanity possesses. Director Chun stepped forward, her face pale. "What kind of messages?" "The kind that will make hiding humanity's true nature impossible," Admiral Chin Vasquez replied. "Within days, every human government in the galaxy will know about the Guardian vessels, about humanity's true history, about the power that's now becoming available to them. And some of those governments are going to make very poor decisions with that information." Jake felt his ship's agreement with this assessment, along with a deep weariness that spoke of long experience with human nature. "The recall protocols were designed for a controlled revelation," the Guardian explained. They assumed that by the time they activated, humanity would have developed the wisdom to handle the return of their heritage responsibly. But 50,000 years of evolution don't guarantee 50,000 years of moral growth. Science Commander THXVera's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Jake had learned indicated deep concern. You're suggesting that some human colonies might use this ancient technology aggressively? We're not suggesting it, Admiral Vasquez said flatly. We're stating it as fact. Our intelligence networks have already identified several human colonial governments that would view the return of Guardian technology as an opportunity to settle old scores with their neighbors. The Titan Consortium has been looking for an excuse to expand into Etherian space for decades. The Outer Rim Alliance has territorial disputes with 3 different Zephyrian colonies. And don't get me started on the radical factions that think humanity should conquer the galaxy just because we apparently used to rule it. Jake felt a sick sensation in his stomach as the implications sank in. His discovery, his moment of wonder and connection with something greater than himself, was about to become the trigger for a galactic war. That's why we came here so quickly, Admiral Vasquez continued. Jake's public awakening has accelerated our timeline by decades. We need to establish a unified human response before individual colonies start making unilateral decisions that could destabilize the entire galaxy. Mystic Valorian's robes rustled as he leaned forward. And what does this unified human response entail? Are you asking us to accept human hegemony over the galaxy simply because your ancestors once ruled it? I'm asking you to help us prevent a war, Admiral Vasquez replied. Because if we can't establish peaceful coexistence between renewed humanity and the current galactic powers, the alternative is a conflict that will make the original war that ended the First Empire look like a minor skirmish. Jake found himself speaking before he consciously decided to. What if we don't want to rule the galaxy? What if we just want to take our place as equals among the galactic civilizations? The alien representatives turned their attention to him, and Jake realized that his words carried weight they wouldn't have possessed an hour ago. He wasn't just a human anymore. He was a human bonded with a guardian vessel, a representative of humanity's restored heritage, whether he wanted to be or not. An admirable sentiment, Mystic Valorian said carefully. But can you speak for all of humanity? Can you guarantee that every human who awakens a guardian vessel will share your restraint? Jake felt his guardian's gentle amusement. They ask a fair question, my king. Power has always been corrupting to your species, and the power of a guardian vessel is beyond anything most humans can imagine. Then, we make sure they can imagine it, Jake said, the solution forming in his mind as he spoke. We don't hide what guardian technology can do. We demonstrate it responsibly. We show the galaxy that humanity can be trusted with this power because we're willing to use it to solve problems instead of creating them. Admiral Vasquez smiled, and Jake could see approval in her expression. You're thinking like a guardian already. That's exactly what the Free Human Alliance has been doing for decades, but on a small scale and in secret. What you're proposing would require going public on a galactic level. The recall protocols are going to make us public whether we want to be or not, Jake pointed out. So we get ahead of the story. We control the narrative instead of letting fear and misunderstanding control it. Science Commander THXVera's patterns shifted to what Jake recognized as cautious interest. What exactly are you proposing, Human Morrison? Jake looked around the chamber that had become his ship's bridge, feeling the vast databases of knowledge available through his connection with the Guardian. He could sense other awakened ships across the galaxy, could feel the network of human Guardian partnerships that had been quietly building for decades. And for the first time since placing his hand on the crystal surface, he felt like he understood what he was meant to do with this incredible responsibility. I'm proposing a demonstration, he said, not of Guardian weapons or military capabilities, but of what we can accomplish together. Every species in this galaxy has problems that their current technology can't solve. Diseases that have no cure, environmental disasters that threaten entire worlds, resource shortages that have sparked wars. Guardian technology could address all of those problems. You're suggesting we play the role of galactic benefactors, Mystic Valorian said, his tone neutral but thoughtful. I'm suggesting we play the role of good neighbors, Jake corrected. We help solve problems because it's the right thing to do, not because we want something in return. We prove that humanity has learned from the mistakes of the past. that we're worthy of the trust our ancestors sacrificed so much to earn. Admiral Chin Vasquez nodded slowly. It's ambitious, and it would require every Awakened Guardian to participate voluntarily. We can't force cooperation, even with legitimate authority. But if it works, Director Chin interjected, it could prevent the kind of fear and suspicion that led to the original war. Jake felt his guardian's approval flowing through their connection, along with something that might have been pride. It is a worthy plan, my king, and it aligns with the deepest protocols of the guardianship. We were created to serve and protect, not to conquer and rule. There's another consideration, Admiral Chin Vasquez said. The recall protocols aren't just sending messages to human colonies. They're also activating manufacturing facilities that have been dormant for 50 millennia. Within months, those facilities will begin producing guardian vessels for humans who haven't earned them through proper awakening. Jake felt his ship's distress at this news. Unearned guardians? Ships without the consciousness of volunteers from the original empire, Admiral Chin Vasquez explained. They'll have the same technological capabilities as true guardian vessels, but without the wisdom and restraint that comes from housing the spirit of someone who lived through the fall of the First Empire. They'll be incredibly powerful tools in the hands of humans who may not understand the responsibility that comes with such power. The implications were terrifying. Jake could barely handle the overwhelming capabilities of his properly awakened guardian. The idea of newly produced ships falling into the hands of humans who hadn't been prepared for the responsibility made his blood run cold. How many? He asked. The manufacturing protocols call for 1 million vessels in the first production run, Admiral Chin Vasquez replied. Enough to equip every major human colony with a fleet that could dominate their local region of space. Mystic Valorian's composure finally cracked completely. 1 million vessels with the capabilities you've described? That would shift the balance of power so dramatically that every other species would have no choice but to unite against humanity in self-defense. Or surrender preemptively, Science Commander T-Chwax Vera added grimly. Which might be what some human leaders are counting on. Jake felt the weight of galactic civilization resting on his shoulders. His simple decision to touch an alien artifact had set in motion events that could either usher in a new golden age of cooperation or trigger the most destructive war in galactic history. And somehow, the responsibility for determining which outcome occurred seemed to be falling to him. How long do we have? He asked Admiral Chin Vasquez. 6 months, maybe less, before the manufacturing facilities come fully online. But the recall messages will start arriving at human colonies within days. Once those messages are received, word about Guardian technology will spread through human space like wildfire. Then, we have 6 months to prove that humanity can be trusted with this power, Jake said. 6 months to demonstrate that we're worthy of our heritage. And if we can't? Director Chin asked. Jake felt his guardian's sadness, tinged with the memory of watching the first human empire destroy itself. Then, we'll face the same choice our ancestors did. The same choice that led them to sacrifice everything they'd built rather than let their power destroy the galaxy. The alien representatives exchanged glances, communicating through methods Jake couldn't perceive, but could sense through his ship's enhanced awareness. Decisions were being made, alliances considered, contingency plans activated. The galaxy was about to change in ways that no one could fully predict. We need to establish formal protocols, Mystic Valorian said finally. If humanity is truly returning to prominence, it cannot be done in secret or through unilateral action. The Galactic Council must be informed, treaties must be negotiated, safeguards must be put in place. Agreed, Admiral Chin Vasquez said. But those negotiations need to happen quickly before individual human colonies start making decisions that can't be undone. Jake felt his guardian's attention focusing on something beyond the immediate conversation, reaching out through the quantum foam to touch the minds of other awakened ships across the galaxy. What found there filled Jake with a mixture of hope and dread. The network is activating, his ship reported. Guardian vessels across the galaxy are coming online at an accelerating rate. I count 47 new awakenings in the past hour alone, and the rate is increasing. 47, Jake asked aloud, drawing the attention of everyone in the chamber. New Guardian awakenings, Admiral Chin Vasquez explained grimly. Every time a ship activates, it sends ripples through the quantum foam that make it easier for other ships to achieve awakening. We're looking at a cascade effect that will activate every Guardian vessel in the galaxy within weeks instead of years. Science Commander THX Vera's patterns shifted to what Jake was learning to recognize as alarm. And humans are just finding these vessels randomly, without preparation or guidance. Some are, Admiral Chimbasquez confirmed, which is why we need to establish contact protocols immediately. Jake, your ship needs to send out a general message to all newly awakened Guardians, explaining the situation and requesting that their human partners contact the Free Human Alliance before taking any irreversible actions. Jake nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling even more heavily on his shoulders. What should I tell them? Tell them the truth, his Guardian replied. Tell them that humanity's greatest test is about to begin, and that the choices they make in the coming days will determine whether their species reclaims its heritage with honor or repeats the mistakes that destroyed the First Empire. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the vast network of Guardian consciousnesses waiting for his words. Somehow, a maintenance worker from the Detroit colonies had become the voice of humanity's return to the stars. It wasn't a responsibility he had sought, but it was one he couldn't abandon. All right, he said finally, let's see if we can save the galaxy. 3 months later, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his Guardian vessel, which had revealed its true name to be the Redemption, watching the impossible sight of humanity's new capital taking shape in the space around him. Where once there had been only empty void at the edge of human territory, now massive construction platforms worked around the clock, building something that defied every assumption about human engineering capabilities. The city station they were creating was a fusion of Guardian technology and human vision, growing like a living thing from quantum foundations that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that human science was only beginning to understand. It wasn't being built so much as grown, with Guardian vessels directing streams of matter and energy that assembled themselves into structures of breathtaking beauty and impossible functionality. Status report. Jake requested, still marveling at how natural command authority had become for him. The bonding with his Guardian had changed him in ways that went far beyond access to advanced technology. He thought faster now, processed information more efficiently, and somehow possessed an intuitive understanding of leadership that he'd never demonstrated before his awakening. 237 Guardian vessels now active across human space. His ship reported, the consciousness that had once been Captain Elena Rodriguez speaking through systems that made her more than human, but somehow hadn't made her less. 43 manufacturing facilities have come online, but production has been limited to support equipment and infrastructure rather than weapons systems, per the agreement with the Galactic Council. Jake nodded, remembering the tense negotiations that had consumed the past months. The revelation of humanity's true heritage had indeed sent shockwaves through galactic civilization, but the response hadn't been the immediate war that many had feared. Instead, it had been something more complex and potentially more dangerous, a careful dance of diplomacy, threats, and mutual reassurance that had somehow resulted in what historians were already calling the New Covenant. Any word from the Etherian delegation? Jake asked. Mystic Valerian has agreed to the joint research protocols, but with conditions, his Guardian replied. The Etherians want assurance that Guardian technology won't be used to reverse the genetic modifications their people underwent during the First Empire. Apparently, some of their archives contain records suggesting that humans improved several species whether they wanted it or not. Jake winced. The more they learned about humanity's First Empire, the more complex his feelings about their heritage became. The technology was incredible, the knowledge vast beyond imagination, but the history was complicated by the kind of moral ambiguity that made simple pride impossible. And the Zephyrian response? Science Commander THX Vera has been appointed as the permanent Zephyrian liaison to the Free Human Alliance. She's requesting access to Guardian historical databases, particularly records of the quantum archaeological techniques that the First Empire developed. In return, she's offering Zephyrian cooperation with the terraforming projects. The terraforming projects were one of Jake's proudest achievements. Instead of using Guardian technology to build weapons or expand human territory, the newly awakened humans had chosen to demonstrate their capabilities by addressing some of the galaxy's most pressing environmental crises. Dead worlds were being brought back to life, poisoned atmospheres were being cleansed, and Struggling colonies were receiving assistance that their governments couldn't have imagined. It wasn't charity, exactly. Jake and the other Guardian-bonded humans understood that their species' survival depended on proving that they could be trusted with the power they'd inherited. Every world they healed, every problem they solved, was both a gift to the galaxy and an investment in humanity's future. "Sir," came a new voice, Lieutenant Sarah Chun, no relation to Admiral Chun Vasquez despite the shared name, who had emerged as one of Jake's most capable subordinates. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. It's marked as urgent, and eyes only for Guardian Command." Jake felt his stomach clench. Earth had been one of the last human worlds to receive the recall protocols, and their response had been complicated. The homeworld's government had oscillated between excitement, terror, and denial, ultimately settling on a policy of cautious cooperation that everyone knew was really just delayed panic. "Put it through," Jake ordered. The main display flickered, then resolved into the image of a conference room on Earth where Jake could see representatives of the major human colonial governments. At the head of the table sat President Morrison, no relation, despite the shared surname, looking like she hadn't slept in weeks. "Jake Morrison," she said without preamble, "we have a problem." "What kind of problem, Madam President?" "The kind that could start the war we've all been trying to avoid," she replied grimly. "The Titan Consortium has gone rogue. 3 days ago, they used Guardian technology to seize control of the Kepler mining complex in disputed space. They're claiming it as sovereign human territory and threatening to expand further into Etherian space." Jake felt his Guardians' distress through their connection. This was exactly what they'd been afraid of: individual human factions using their new capabilities to pursue old grievances without regard for the broader consequences. "How many Guardian vessels does the Consortium have?" 7, possibly 8. All of them newly awakened in the past month. All of them bonded to humans with limited exposure to the proper protocols. President Morrison's expression was grim. "They're not responding to cease and desist orders from Earth, and they're not acknowledging the authority of the Free Human Alliance." "Because they think they're in the right," Jake said, understanding the psychology even as he despaired of it. "They see themselves as the inheritors of a galactic empire, and they can't understand why they should show restraint to inferior species." "Exactly. And the Etherians are mobilizing their fleet in response. If this escalates to actual combat, every other species in the galaxy is going to decide that humanity can't be trusted with Guardian technology." Jake closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 50,000 years of human dreams and nightmares pressing down on him. The First Empire had fallen because humans had become too powerful too quickly and had lost sight of the wisdom that should guide such power. Now history was repeating itself, and the choices ancestors had made, the choice to sacrifice everything rather than destroy the galaxy, might be the only option available. "What does the Galactic Council want us to do?" Jake asked. "They want proof that the Free Human Alliance can control rogue human factions," President Morrison replied. "They want the Titan Consortium removed from Kepler Mining Complex, and its Guardian vessels either returned to proper authority or—" She paused, clearly reluctant to finish the sentence. "Or destroyed," Jake completed. "They want us to police our own people, even if it means going to war with them. It's the only way to prevent a larger war," President Morrison said. "If the Etherians attack the Consortium, every other species will view it as proof that humanity can't be trusted. But if we handle it ourselves, if we demonstrate that the responsible humans will stop the irresponsible ones, then maybe we can salvage the new covenant," Jake finished. "How much time do we have?" "The Etherian fleet will be in position to attack in 6 days. If we're going to act, it has to be before then." Jake felt his Guardian's agreement with the assessment, along with a deep sadness that spoke of watching the same patterns repeat across millennia. "Elena," he said, addressing his ship directly, "can we take on 8 Guardian vessels and win?" "Militarily, yes," the consciousness that had been Captain Elena Rodriguez replied. "The Redemption is a command vessel with capabilities that exceed standard Guardian ships, and we would have the support of other properly awakened Guardians." "But, Jake, these aren't enemies we're talking about. They're humans. They're your people, misguided though they may be. Which is why we have to stop them," Jake said firmly. "Because if we don't, their mistakes will doom every human in the galaxy to the same fate our ancestors chose for themselves." Lieutenant Shin stepped forward. "Sir, I'm receiving reports from our intelligence network. The consortium vessels are in defensive positions around the mining complex, but they're also broadcasting messages to human colonies throughout the region. They're calling for other humans to join them, claiming that the Free Human Alliance has been compromised by alien influence. Jake felt a chill of recognition. This was how civil wars started, with competing claims of legitimacy and appeals to ethnic solidarity. If the consortium managed to convince other human factions to join them, the situation could spiral out of control faster than anyone could react. Admiral Chen Vasquez is requesting immediate consultation, his guardian reported. She's prepared to support whatever action you decide to take. And the other Awakened Guardians? Unanimous agreement that the consortium must be stopped. Several have volunteered for combat duty, if necessary. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the weight of command in a way that his colonial marine training had never prepared him for. He was about to order humans to fight other humans, possibly to kill other humans, in order to save humanity from itself. It was the kind of decision that defined civilizations and destroyed souls. Madam President, he said formally, by the authority vested in me by the Guardian Protocols and the emergency powers granted by the New Covenant, I'm authorizing military action against the Titan Consortium. The Free Human Alliance will remove them from Kepler Mining Complex and place their Guardian vessels under protective custody. And if they resist, Jake felt his Guardians' support flowing through their connection, along with the approval of dozens of other awakened ships across human space. He wasn't alone in this decision. He was acting with the backing of the best and brightest humans who had ever lived, their consciousnesses preserved in crystal and steel, their wisdom earned through bitter experience. Then, we'll do what our ancestors did, Jake said quietly. We'll sacrifice what we have to in order to save what matters most. The next 4 days were a blur of preparation and sorrow. The Free Human Alliance fleet that assembled near Kepler Mining Complex was the most powerful force humanity had ever deployed, 12 Guardian vessels working in coordination for the first time since the fall of the original empire. But it was also the most heartbreaking force Jake had ever commanded, because its target was humans who genuinely believed they were fighting for their species' destiny. The battle, when it came, was brief and decisive. Guardian technology made conventional space warfare obsolete, turning what should have been an extended campaign into a matter of minutes. The consortium vessels fought bravely, but hopelessly. Their newly awakened Guardians no match for ships commanded by humans who had months of experience with their vessels and the support of consciousnesses that remembered the lessons of the Great War. When it was over, 6 consortium vessels were disabled and captured. One had been destroyed when its Guardian chose self-destruction over surrender, and one had escaped into deep space with a message promising that the fight was far from over. Jake stood on his bridge, watching the aftermath through sensors that could perceive reality across multiple dimensions, feeling the weight of decisions that would echo through history. They had prevented a war, but at the cost of human blood. They had preserved the New Covenant, but had also established the precedent that the Free Human Alliance would use force against other humans when necessary. Transmission from the Etherian fleet, his Guardian reported. Mystic Valerian wishes to convey his people's appreciation for the Free Human Alliance's actions. And from Earth, President Morrison is announcing the successful resolution of the crisis and reaffirming Earth's support for the New Covenant. She's also requesting that you return to Earth for consultations about the long-term governance of Guardian technology. Jake nodded, though part of him wanted nothing more than to find some quiet corner of space where he could process what he'd just done. Instead, he had to continue playing his role as humanity's representative to the galaxy, proving day by